So to get us started, I just want to throw a picture up here. It's black and white. What was the year that this photo was taken?
1965.
All right, man. How many of us weren't even born in 1965, right? Incredible, right? So 53 years of marriage. That's incredible. I love this photo of you guys. I love the smile that you've got. I think it's such a delightful smile. And one of the things I love about John and Joanne is that this smile that you see in this photo taken in the 1960s is the same smile that you see in a photo that was taken just a couple of years ago on their Facebook page. I was Facebook stalking yesterday, and this is the photo of their profile. And I just love this picture of 53 years of faithfulness, still arm in arm, still with those same smiles. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And so today, we're going to walk through the final chapter of Song of Songs. We've gone through it verse by verse. And as we do that, we're going to have John and Joanne speak their wisdom of 53 years of marriage into us as well. And so I'm looking forward to our time together. As we get to the end of the message, maybe to catch you up, maybe you missed last week, or maybe you haven't been able to watch it online. We've been following really the love story between a young man and a young woman as they are emotionally attracted and physically attracted to each other in the first couple of chapters. They move into a season of dating and romance and relationship. They get to their wedding day. We have a robust conversation about what healthy sexuality looks like. That's all of chapter 4. And then there are about 2 to 3 chapters, over 25% of the book. They're in a fight. Come on, somebody. That's just marriage, right? They're in a fight for 25% of the time. And then we get to chapter 8. And like any good Broadway musical, the song that began the show is kind of the song that kind of wraps it up. There's development, there's an arc in the characters. And what we find in chapter 8 is that this young couple that we were introduced into in the beginning have now grown old and wise together, and they're looking back on their life. And what they've had is a flourishing, healthy, God-honoring relationship. And that's what we're going to talk about today. That no matter where you are on your journey, the question is the relationship we're in healthy? Is where we are in a good place? And John, I know you're a doctor, so we're always looking for signs and symptoms and things like that. And so what we're going to talk about as we look at Song of Songs chapter 8 are 4 indicators of a healthy marriage. And we want to remind you of the 2 rules that we've got for this series. The first one is this: listen for you, not the person next to you. This isn't about what they should have done or what they need to do or what the person in the last marriage should have done that would have made it all better. This is about you right now and what God has for you. And the second one is don't look back. You're a new creation. God is a God of fresh starts and new beginnings, and what he has for your future is better than what you have experienced in your past. Now, there's 2 groups of people in the room. Some of us are married and some of us are not. And I want to address each of you because while this message is really focused on what it means to be in a healthy marriage, there are, I think, some takeaways for us regardless of what season that we're in. And so if you're married, I just want to kind of encourage you to think about the message this way. You're going to hear 4 indicators today, and you might get overwhelmed by all of the things that it takes to have a healthy marriage. And the reality is we're not going to be able to fix everything all at once, but what we can do is pick one indicator that we're going to talk about today and make the decision to work on it over the next 30 days. This is about a long devotion in one direction and trusting God each step of the way. And maybe you find yourself today single or dating. Maybe you're single and this is God's call on your life and you're perfectly content with that. Maybe you're single and you desire to be in a relationship, or you're single again and trying to navigate what God might have for you. Maybe you're in a dating relationship right now considering marriage and what that might be for you as well. I think there's something important for you to glean as well. As we talk about these 4 indicators today, some of them really are specific to marriage. There's no doubt about that. But pay special attention to indicator number 1 and number 4, because I think these 2 things are really the foundation of a valuable friendship and relationship. And for all of us, whether or not we're married or not, God's designed us to be in community. He's designed us to be in belonging and knowing close friendship with others. And all of us can grow in becoming better friends, better communicators, and better gifts to the people around us. So we're going to jump in today with the 4 indicators of a healthy marriage. And the first one is this. You can write it down in your notes. It is affection. Write that down. Affection. So Song of Songs, chapter 8, verse 1, just to paint the picture, they're older, they're grayer, they're wiser. And she speaks, and she says this to her man. She says, "If only you were to me like a brother who was nursed at my mother's breasts. Then, if I found you outside, I would kiss you, and no one would despise me. If your head tilts a little bit to the side when you see that, it's perfectly fine. Mine did as well, all right? Just this week, I was talking with my daughters about some things, and one of my kids said, can brothers marry sisters? And Emma, my oldest, goes, probably not the best decision. She's like, Daddy, that's called incest, right? And I was like, that's correct. And she's like, and that doesn't turn out well all the time, right? And I was like, depends on what state you're in, babe. That's what I said. But that's the reality here. When we read that, that's what we think about. But we've got to place it in its proper context. And this is written in the ancient Near East. And in the ancient Near East, the cultural norms and values were that a married couple was not permitted. It was against the law, in some places even punishable by death, for a married couple to interact or show a public display of affection. But it was fine for brothers and sisters and family members to do that. And so what she's saying here is, man, I wish that I could show you how I feel about you in public. I want to display my care and affection for you in public. So when we talk about affection, a healthy indicator of your marriage going well is that there is a public display of affection. The way that you walk together, you're fine to hold hands. You're holding hands in the car. Your arm is around her shoulder. She leans into you. There's a sense that, hey, we like each other and we're okay with people knowing that we like each other. Verse 2, she says this. She said, I would lead you and bring you to my mother's house, she who has taught me. And then she says a verse here that is so scandalous and so racy. I'm not going to give you all of the details. I'll let you figure it out on your own. She said, I will give you spiced wine to drink, the nectar of my pomegranates. And you're still wondering what that means. Go home, cut a pomegranate open, squeeze it, and you'll get exactly what she's saying, all right? She's talking about physical intimacy that is only meant for the bedroom and meant in a private way. And so there's public affection and there's private affection. And the healthy marriage has both. There are both that are illustrated here. A sense of comfort in both public and comfort in private, a desire to be close. She says this in verse 3, his left arm is under my head and his right arm embraces me. Case in point, right there. Boom, well done. This is the idea that they are close with one another. They're affectionate with one another. And then in verse 4, for the fifth time in this song, we see this phrase, daughters of Jerusalem, I charge you, do not arouse or awaken love until it so desires. Remember, this is a Broadway musical. These are popular songs. Everyone knows the songs in the culture. All of the kids would be singing these songs. I grew up, I don't know if you guys did, I grew up kind of with this song that went like this, John and Joanne sitting in a tree, Kissing. Y'all know this song? First comes, then comes, then comes. Well done. Yeah, that's it, right? Good job. Good job. Good job. That's how these songs would be sung. Everybody knew them. And so this warning really serves as a lesson to those who are growing up in the Near East that, hey, the beauty of love, sexual intimacy, closeness, belonging, it's a beautiful thing, but there's a time for it, and there's a wise place for it, and don't awaken it before it's time. Affection is really important, whether or not you're married or if you're single. In fact, it's a core desire and need for every single human being. C.S. Lewis writes in his book, The Four Loves, this. He says, affection is responsible for 9/10 of whatever solid and durable happiness there is in our lives. So I've got some friends who are single and they need affection. And affection looks like a hug. Affection looks like planning a meal together. Affection looks like time spent. Affection looks like emotional awareness and being close. And the same healthy things that you would use to develop any good friendship are the same healthy things that you would use to develop intimacy and affection in a marriage. The same foundations are necessary. And so, John and Joanne, you've been married 53 years. There's definitely seasons to marriage, right? There's the dating season, then you get married, and then, John, I know that you were through residency, which was a busy time, and then you guys have moved. How many times have you guys moved? A number of times, right?
A number of times.
A number of times.
Maybe 15.
15 times, all right? 15 times. So through all of those seasons, and every kind of iteration of that, how has affection been an important part of your life in marriage? And what are unique ways in which you guys are able to display affection for each other? When you hear that word, what comes to mind?
Oh my goodness. I would just say doing things together, just being pleasant, smiling, pats on the back or whatever. because we're doing things together.
Exactly. Being together, I'll stress several times that throughout it all, I hope I'm getting better over these 53 years. May not have started out the best, but getting better.
Yeah.
And working to get better.
That's good.
But affection is so important, and it can almost be like a weapon, and that's something that can be withheld.
Yeah, that's powerful. I think that's a great question for all of us to be thinking about. You are designed as a human being to need affection, which begs this question, and every single one of these will have a question as you kind of identify what's the one that I'm going to work on in my marriage, or how am I going to grow or develop as a friend, depending on the season that you're in. Am I withholding or extending affection to those that I love? For some of us, you are withholding affection right now from your spouse because they've done something that you don't like, and you are upset at them. And so the way that you've decided to wound them is to actually withhold from them the thing that will actually be the agent of bonding. That conversation, that coffee, that planning that date, that time together may be the very thing that you need to be able to get past where you are right now. We do this with our children sometimes. When they act in a certain way, we punish them by withholding affection. And one of the greatest coaches I've ever had has told me, no matter what, even as you discipline, you always let your child know that you are there for them and that you are close to them, that their behavior does not dictate whether or not you are affectionate to them. Your affection is always there and unconditional. So I want to give you some next steps. If you're like, yeah, that's it. Affection, that's the place. Like, I'm going to check out for the rest of the message. This is the area I need to grow in. I want to give you a couple of terms here that I think are helpful that might be good categories or spaces for you to think about how to do this. The first one is initiate physically. For some of us, that might mean, hey, get out of your comfort zone a little bit. You know, John and I were talking about this, that public displays of affection is an area where he's really grown over the years. Not necessarily the kind of natural thing, but because he loves his wife, he chooses to step out of that comfort zone. For some of you, that might be it. You've got to initiate physically and step out of your comfort zone. Look at me if you're married especially. Your comfort zone should not define whether or not you are affectionate to the person that you've made promises to. You should step out of that for the sake of serving and loving them. The next one is communicate verbally. I think this is for everyone in the room, regardless of whether or not you're married or not. We need to let our friends know, let the people around us know that we care about them. I struggle with this personally. I took a guy out to grab a coffee this week and kind of looked him in the eyes, and I shared with him like how I felt about him, that I cared for him, and it was really awkward, not going to lie. You know, it was kind of this moment where we talk about light things all of the time, and here I am kind of sharing my heart. But one of the things that I've learned over time is you cannot assume that people know. Okay, let me say that again. You cannot assume that people know. I've done a number of funerals, and I've never been at a funeral where the person who is burying their loved one said, man, you know what? I overtold them how much I cared about them. That's never what you hear. What you hear is the opposite. Man, if I had more time, this is what I'd say. So let me put it to you this way. Nothing should be said at your eulogies or at the eulogies of people that you love that they have not heard from you over and over and over and over and over again. We need to do this in our marriages, in our friendships, and with any relationship that we value. And lastly, plan intentionally. I love this about my wife. Stacy does an incredible job at this. So for the first 10 days of the month of March, I have been with our kids kind of solo dadding it for I think 7 or 8 of those days. Feels like 80, but it's only been 8. 8 of those days. Stacy went on women's retreat, and then she got on a plane on Wednesday and flew to Utah to go skiing for 4 days to get some rest and relaxation and spend time with her dad, who she loves. And so 8 of the last 10 days, I've been holding down the fort. And when you're kind of 1-on-4, the goal there is everybody surviving. That's it. And Chick-fil-A owns half of my paycheck. I mean, that's pretty much what the first 10 days of the month have been like. But here's what I love about my wife, right? She knows that I'm showing affection to her by creating some space and margin for her to get some R&R. So she knows that quality time matters to me. And so without me knowing about it, without me having any kind of word about it at all, she came to me and let me know, hey, April 3rd to the 6th, the tickets are booked. We're going on a trip, just me and you. You don't have to think about it at all. And what I love about her is and this is something that we do in our marriage, we always have something on the calendar that we are looking forward to. And it may not be an extravagant trip for you. It may be, hey, we're planning on going to get coffee together. We're planning to go and do this hobby together. But you should always have something on the calendar because it demonstrates to the person you're with that you care about them and that you are for them. Make the plan. Do not wait for someone else to do it. True in our friendships as well. So the first one is affection. Here's the second indicator of a healthy marriage. It's devotion. Look at what she says in verse 5, or the friends rather. These are the people that have been a part of the song, the Daughters of Jerusalem. They're kind of the ensemble cast. They show up in the middle of the musical and they kind of back out during different scene changes. They jump in and they sing these words. Who is this coming up from the wilderness, leaning on her beloved? This is a powerful, powerful word for two reasons. One, look at what they're coming out of. They're not coming out of the springtime. Are you following that? Where everything's good. They're coming out of the wilderness. They're coming out of a dry season. They're coming out of a hard time, but they're coming out of it together. She's leaning on him. The sense of dependence and belonging is there. There's something about walking the hard seasons of life that are so essential and important to enjoy the good ones. She goes on and she speaks and she says, under the apple tree. Anytime you see the apple tree in kind of Near East literature, it's talking about the idea of provision and protection. So she's saying, under my man, under the protection and provision of my man, that's where I roused you. There your mother conceived you. There she who was in labor gave you birth. She's pointing back to his mama and saying, I'm so happy that your mama gave birth to you. I'm so happy that your mama raised you the way that she raised you. How many of us are grateful for good mamas? Anybody grateful for good mamas in the place? Yeah, right? Absolutely. We're grateful for good mamas that raise good men because those good men become providers and protectors for the people that they love. And so she takes a moment with gratitude to look back and say, I'm so grateful that God gave me you. She sees her man, who she was in an argument with 2 chapters earlier, who she was upset with and wasn't willing to get out of bed for him because he was late and he was not romantic and he was a slob and he was trying to sweet talk her and it didn't work. She sees that man as God's gift to her. Because of that devotion that they have to one another, she says this in verse 6, place me like a seal. That word seal is like the old kind of picture that you get sometimes in those movies or shows that you watch where the king is writing a letter and he seals it with wax and it's his sign and it's clear that this letter belongs to him. She says, I want the world to know, the arm is public. I want the world to know that we are together. But I want us internally, place me like a seal on your arm and a seal over your heart. I want us to know internally and externally for the rest of the world to know that we're together. You know, the idea of vows at weddings come out of Song of Songs, chapter 8, verses 6 and 7. And the reason why we give a symbol of a vow, for some of us it was a ring, for some of us it was a sand ceremony, for others of us it was, the lighting of the candles and the candles blew out and it was a complete mess, that whole thing. The reason why we have symbols for our vows is because of this here. She says, let's publicly let the world know where we are. Till death do us part, she says. Because our love, it's as strong as death. Once you die, you're dead. It's done. It's one time. It's forever. It's jealousy unyielding as the grave. It burns like blazing fire, like a mighty flame. There's a passion about this kind of commitment that they have. She says in verse 7, many waters cannot quench love, meaning it doesn't matter how hard it rains, the fire that I've got in my heart for you, nothing is going to turn that off. Rivers cannot sweep it away. If one were to give all the wealth of one's house for love, meaning if a man were to say, I'll give you $1 to walk away from him, she says no. It would be utterly scorned. If I gave you $1, no. $10, no. $1,000, no. $1 million, no. $10 million, maybe. I'm just kidding. That's not it. But that's the idea here. That you cannot put a price tag on this kind of love. You can't buy it. It's forged in fire. It's experienced through pain. The cost of it and the worth of it cannot be valued. It's more precious than anything the world has to offer. That's the kind of devoted love that they have to one another. Devotion means that we are in this for better or for worse. It means that we're in this for richer or for poorer. It means we're in this in sickness and in health. It means we are in this until death do us part. So John and Joanne, one of the things that I just love about you is that you guys have experienced better or for worse. You've experienced richer or for poorer. You've experienced sickness and in health. For you two, maybe share with us just a couple of kind of snapshots maybe of over the course of 53 years. How have things been hard? How have things been difficult? What are ways in which we could resonate with you and be like, yeah, there's pain. It hasn't always been easy. Would love to hear some of those things.
Well, We had 3 children, but our youngest one died of a brain aneurysm when he was 27. And that could have torn us apart. But I had read a lot about that. So we determined to stick together and find comfort.
Early in our married life, we had really wanted to have children and had gone a long time. And when you're an obstetrician and you go to 8 years without having any pregnancy, you wonder what's going on. But Joanne got pregnant and then lost twins. I was less than sensitive at that time. I was not as sensitive as I should have been. Again, years make things better. By the time other bad things have come around, I've gotten better. And I think what I would say to the guys is one of the things that's important that I learned through that and then through the others is to be there. Don't be absent, be there.
It's powerful. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, one of the things I appreciate about their journey is that there have been different stops along the way where it would have been easy to say, hey, we're done. But your decision to stay devoted has been big. There's a comment that I've heard somebody say before that they've never considered divorce, but they have considered murder in marriages. So for you, talk to me a little bit about kind of divorce. Did that ever come up in your kind of marriage, and how did you guys navigate that?
I don't know where we picked it up, but we were taught never to say the D word. And so we didn't, because words are so powerful. They can bring things into existence. That's the way God created the earth.
Yeah.
I think that came actually from our very early, one of our earliest home groups that we were in with young married couples who we've remained friends with for 50 years.
Wow.
And one of the things we agreed in the group was that the divorce word would never enter our conversation. Never. As I said, there were other words that may have entered our conversation, not good words. And I know our daughter's here somewhere who could confirm that, and hope she'll agree with much of what we've said here. Yeah. But the divorce word opens a door, as Joanne said. You speak things into existence, and that door can be opened, and then it becomes easy to walk through. Yeah. Don't ever open that door. That's
powerful. That's really, really powerful. As I was prepping this message, there was a thought that came to mind that I wanted to share with you here, and it's really tied to the question that I think if devotion is the place that you're at, is an important question to be asking, which is this: am I going to stay devoted to my spouse even when it's hard? I had a man come up to me in first service after we had wrapped up, and he came to me and said, I've been married 50 years. And he said, there have been times when I did not like my wife at all. But faithfulness over the long period of time, it's amazing how every single time I thought I had lost those butterflies, they came back. And he said, our love is stronger and deeper now than it's ever been. And I think we buy the lie in our culture that if you have a bad week, or if you have a bad season, or if you have a bad year, that means that you have a bad marriage. And I don't think that could be anything further from the truth. That the reality is that marriage is about the long game. It's about having a long devotion in one direction. And like we read in verse 5, it's usually those wilderness seasons that lead to the springtime seasons. So look at me. Your marriage, if you're married, is going to have wilderness seasons. There are going to be seasons when it's dry. There are going to be seasons when it's hard. There are going to be seasons when it would be easier to give up. But on the other side of that season is a harvest that you are only going to experience if you choose to stick it out. So here's some next steps that I want to give to people in the room. The first one is this. I think some of you really need to reconsider or consider for the first time renewing your vows. And I know sometimes it's like, oh, we'll renew our vows when we get to the 25-year mark. Listen to me. You may not get to 25 the way you're going, all right? There's something powerful about standing before God, standing before family and friends, standing in front of your pastor or a spiritual leader in your life, and recommitting yourself to your spouse, saying those vows again. Stacy and I did it at the 5-year mark of our marriage. We rewrote our vows, and we said, hey, the way that we started the first couple of years, it was good, but it wasn't great. We didn't live up to what we said we were going to be about. And so we're putting a stake in the ground, and I'll tell you this right now, our first 5 were good, but our last 5 have been way better, and I think it's because we can go back to that point. There's something powerful about a moment. So men, some of you might just need to consider this, okay? You might just need to consider, find the place, get the friends, set the date, renew your vows, and remind the person that you're with that you're in this for the long haul. Here's the second one, and I really feel this burdened in my heart. I'm going to say this at all of our gatherings, and I want to say it today too, and I don't know who it's for, but I feel like there are some of you who during this series have thought about throwing away your marriage. You've thought about throwing in the towel. It has been way too hard to sit through a series where you look at the idealized picture of relationship and what you say is, this is way too hard. I need a restart. I cannot do it with the person that I'm with. The pain is too great. The hurt is too intolerable. The wounds are too deep. And I want to look you in the eye, maybe, I don't know, look you in the face, look you in the soul, and say, do not throw away your marriage. Throw away the exit strategy you've been thinking about. Throw away the papers. Rip them up when you go home. Do not make the phone call to that lawyer. Do not go through on the affair that you've been thinking about starting, or the one that you're in right now that is sabotaging your relationship. On the other side of your faithfulness is a harvest that you will only see when you stick it out. Which leads to this, get counseling. The best marriages I know are people that experience counseling. Whether or not it be through 40 plus years of home group, like you guys have experienced, what we call community group here at Nona. And of the 53 years they've been married, they've been in community group for more than 40 of them. They were in community group before community group was invented, all right? Like that's how long they've been in it. And that counsel has changed your life. Some of you need professional counseling, and you need to walk away from the pride and arrogance of thinking you can figure it out on your own and just say you need help. Your pastor and his wife go to counseling, okay? It is not something for weak people. It is something for courageous people who are willing to say, I'm willing to lay down everything and anything to make sure that the relationship we have is one worth having and one that will sustain. Which leads to the third one. The sign or the indicator of a healthy relationship is reputation. Now, you might look at reputation and think, that sounds so anti-Christian. Christians shouldn't care about their reputations. Well, no, we shouldn't care about our reputation, but we should live in a way where our reputation precedes us. So in Song of Songs chapter 8, it's not just the choir and the ensemble that shows up, but then it's the brothers. And if you remember, the brothers were the guys who worked this peasant girl to the ground. They made her go into the vineyards. They made her spend time out in the farm. She says that they were wicked. And they show back up on the scene. We haven't heard from them since chapter 1. They show up and they say this, and they go to their little sister and ask her for advice. And this is what they say. We've got a little sister, and her breasts are not yet grown, meaning she hasn't entered puberty yet. What shall we do? That's their question. What shall we do for our sister on the day she's spoken for? If she's a wall, we'll build towers of silver on her. If she is a door, we will enclose her with panels of cedar. Here's something that I've noticed, and maybe you've noticed this as well. We tend to be asked for advice in the areas where it seems our life is thriving. You ever notice that? Like no one comes to me and says, hey, Collin, how do I bench press 400 pounds? Like that has never been asked in all of my living, right? Not an area in which I'm proficient. But we get asked all the time, hey, how do you and Stacy manage 4 kids and find ways to still romance each other? How do you guys handle money? How do you guys manage the season of life that you're in? This is what you need to know. Your marriage is someone else's standard. If you're married with children, your marriage is the front row seat that your kids have to what marriage is like. Are you proud of the marriage that they are seeing? In your workplace, some of you, your marriage is the closest version of a marriage that your colleagues are seeing. Would they, by looking at your marriage, say, hey, that's something that I want to be a part of? I was doing a wedding just recently. And I walked in, and usually when I walk into a wedding, people don't think that I'm the officiant. I don't know why. Maybe it's because I look like, I'm 9. But anyways, as I walk in, right, they just don't expect me to be the guy. And so I'm in there, kind of in the bathroom, and there's another guy in the bathroom, and it's always this awkward moment. I don't know if women, y'all talk all day in the bathroom. Guys, it's like you walk in, you face forward, make no eye contact, don't talk to no one, right? That's what happens. This guy looks at me, and he's like, you here for the wedding? And I was like, yeah, yes, sir. He's like, you're young. And I was like, well, that's nice. I don't hear that all the time. He looked at me and he said, if there's anything you do, He said, don't get married. And then he walked out and met his wife, and they walked into the wedding. And then I walked past him with the groomsmen and talked about my wife and kids, and I made eye contact with him just for fun. Here's the thing, your marriage is someone else's standard. Your marriage matters. It matters. And we've got a generation that's getting married later and getting married less because of what they've seen. Let's paint a better picture for them. So, 53 years. When did you realize, people are paying attention to this thing? And what is some wisdom that you would give to people that are in a position where their marriage is being watched by kids or being watched by colleagues or friends?
In the last place we lived, the assistant pastor and wife asked us to go to dinner so that we could tell them why our marriage was still going on. And it took a while to get us there, and they just started quizzing us. But you know why? Because each of their parents had gotten divorced, and they didn't want that. So that's when I realized somebody had been watching me, us. And that's it.
Also, I just remembered one of the small groups, or a home group that we had a group of young marrieds meet in our house on a regular basis as well. And I can't help but feel that they were watching. I mean, you may not always be aware that people are watching, but they are. They watch how you respond in the tough times
You're
and in the good times, both.
You're absolutely right. So here's the reputation question that I would kind of throw out to you married folk. Are people asking us for advice on our relationship? Are people asking for us for advice on our relationship? If the answer is no, it most likely means they're not impressed with your relationship. Which might seem harsh, but it's an important piece. Like my kids ask me about my marriage. Young men ask us about our marriage. So many young women ask Stacy about it. And it's when we realize that people are asking us questions that we realize, oh my gosh, not only are they paying attention, because everybody's paying attention, but there's some things that we might be able to give. And you might be in a season where you need to start thinking about how do you give. So what's the next step if the reputation of your marriage is maybe not one where it's like, hey, it's really solid? Here's the next step. Focus on indicator 1, 2, or 4, all right? That's it. That's the next step. What it most likely means is that people are not seeing the level of affection in your relationship that they would want in their future one. They're not seeing the level of devotion in your relationship that they would want to see in another. Young men, sons especially, they see you, Dad. And Dad, when you constantly pick hobbies and games and sports and time away than you do romance and mama, they pay attention to that. They know whether or not you're devoted. They know whether or not you're still a boy who can shave. They are paying attention. So if you're in that season, I would say focus in on indicator 1, 2, or indicator 4, which is transformation. I love how Song of Songs ends. These last 4 verses are some of the most powerful words, I think. It paints such a beautiful picture. She says this, I'm a wall, and my breasts are like towers. Thus I have become. I love that phrase. I have become. It indicates transformation. I've become, look, in his eyes, like one bringing contentment. Meaning, when she thinks about how he thinks about her, she knows how he thinks about her. She knows he thinks she brings me contentment. There's a confidence that this woman has that she did not have earlier. Remember in Song of Songs chapter 1, she said, do not look at me. And now in Song of Songs chapter 8, she's saying, I know how he looks at me. And I know that when he sees me, I bring him contentment. What a change in her heart. She says in verse 11, Solomon who was the richest man during that time, had a vineyard in Baal-Hamon, meaning this is how he made his money. He let out his vineyard to tenants, and each was to bring for its fruit 1,000 shekels of silver. So Solomon's a big landowner. She's comparing herself and talking about the richest man that has ever lived. And look what she says in verse 12. But my own vineyard is mine. Meaning the only person to own a vineyard isn't Solomon. She's got her own vineyard now. She says, my vineyard is mine to give. The 1,000 shekels are for you, Solomon, and 200 are for those who tend its fruit. Here's what it means. It means that the peasant became the princess. That girl in Song of Songs chapter 1 who said, don't look at me because I'm ugly and I'm poor and I'm not anything special. I'm just working in this vineyard. I've got nothing to do but that. That young woman has transformed into a princess who owns her own vineyard now. The nature of this relationship and the decades that they've spent together is that the love of the man that she is with has allowed her to flourish and to transform. In fact, if you look back at verse 5, it says, who is this coming up from the wilderness leaning on her beloved? Meaning the friends look at her and they don't even recognize her anymore because of how much she's changed. That's the beauty of a powerful marriage. That's the beauty of powerful friendships and relationships for those of us that are single. Is that God brings the right people at the right time into our life to help us become who he's always intended us to be. And so a healthy marriage and a healthy relationship helps us become who God intended us to be. I mean, could you imagine if this was a Broadway musical? They should make it a Broadway musical. We're introduced to a young woman, a poor peasant, no confidence. And we find her in the final song, a proud princess transformed. And that is the hope of every relationship. So, John and Joanne, 53 years. You are different people, I'm assuming, than you were, than the people we saw in that black and white photo. How has your marriage helped each of you become the better version of you that God always intended you to be? So Joanne, how has John helped you become a better woman?
He's adventuresome and I'm not. And he's fun. He's a jokester. I mean, I like being with him. I mean, I would choose to be with him every day, you know. And I also know that I've had some rough edges taken off. You compromise. Just, you enjoy peace and love.
53 years ago, when that black and white picture was taken, I was not walking the way I should have walked. I didn't have a close relationship with the Lord. Joanne thought I had, but realized I hadn't, and she really lived out 1 Peter 3. If you haven't read it lately, go ahead and read that. And I really think even though she doesn't do real estate, she is a Proverbs 31 wife as well. And so she's made me a much better person.
It's incredible.
And I said this early service, I want to say it again. We're nothing special. We committed a bunch of things at the beginning to follow the Lord and to do things in certain ways, and it's by his grace that we're here, not through any credit of our own.
That's incredible. Hey, so can we thank John and Joanne for the way in which they've invested in our church and in our time together. They're going to leave the stage here. Can we put our hands together and thank them for the ways in which they made a difference? We love you guys. So it's all about transformation. It's all about knowing and taking your next best step in following Jesus. And if you're single, you need these kinds of friends. And you need to be intentional about the ways in which you build relationships with them. And if you're married, this is the reason why you're together. The reason why you're together is not for the tax benefits. The reason why you're together is not because culture says that you need to find somebody. The reason why you're together is not so that you feel in love all the time and it feels like a romantic comedy every day. The reason why you're together is because the God of the universe, who saw you and knew you before you even were known by your parents, prepared you and made you for relationship and decided to bring somebody alongside you to help you become who he ultimately wants you to be. So here's the transformation question. Am I helping my spouse take their next best step in following Jesus? Some of us have missed the mark. We've dropped our gaze off of what matters most. Marriage isn't about us. Marriage is about what God wants to do in us and through us. And when we realize that the person we're with is not here and does not exist for our happiness, but exists for us to help, that's when everything changes. So I want to give you some next steps here. Maybe this is the indicator you need to focus on. Attend community group. Get in a group. It'll change your life. Continue gathering together on Sunday and sitting next to each other. Make it a priority to be here together. I know that it's hard, but it changes the game. In fact, studies show that marriages where couples stand and sit together consistently at church services have a far lower rate of divorce because they're learning together and they're growing together. Read the Bible together. I love this about John and Joanne. They shared this this week, that they have read the scriptures and prayed together every day for the last 50-something years. And when they miss, they feel it. And they get back oriented around God's word in their life. And for some of you, the answer here is you just got to stop getting in the way. Like fellas, you just need to man up and choose to watch the kids so that your wife can go to women's retreat and figure out how to do it because she needs that time with women. And ladies, some of you need to make the choice to be okay with him being away on Saturday mornings every now and then to play golf with his fellas, because it's not just about hitting a ball, but it's about the conversations he gets to have and the camaraderie and the connection that he has, and it matters. You've got to create space. Be one another's cheerleaders and champions, and know that you are in the corner of a person that God has given to you to help flourish and to help grow. I love how the song ends. Verse 13, he says, "You who dwell in the gardens with friends in attendance, let me hear your voice." He looks to the crowd who's been watching the play and he says, you can make some noise because this is what a relationship can look like. And as the crowd is going wild, she steps in verse 14 and she says, "Come away, my beloved, and be like a gazelle, like a young stag," Hebrew for stud muffin, "on the spice-laden mountains." That's Hebrew for they lived happily ever after. So what's next? 5 weeks, 8 chapters, beautiful song telling us the story of a young couple that falls in love, a young couple that experiences sexual intimacy, a couple that fights, and a couple that finishes well. What does it mean for us? Where do we go from here? Well, if you're married, I want to just give you a special invitation to do something today that might just change the framework of your future marriage. If you want a stronger marriage, we want to challenge you to email marriage to hello@nonachurch.com or write it on your Connect card with your information, and you will be added to an email list for events and classes and retreats that we are developing and planning this year to help you grow in your marriage. This isn't just a series and now we move on to the next thing. This is a journey we're going to go on together, because I believe when marriages are healthy, when families are healthy, communities thrive, and we are for Nona. For those of us who are feeling pain today, those of us that are feeling hope deferred, those of us living in regret, let me remind you of this good news. That while we've been reading Song of Songs, it's ultimately a story of a king pursuing his love. And God is a king who's been pursuing you. And he won't give up on you. And he won't stop pursuing your heart. And he won't stop loving you. So no matter where you are, where you've been, what you've done, or what you hope for, put your trust in a God who redeems all things, makes all things new, and says that the best is yet to come.